welcome to Insight. I'm Natasha Jhavhaskar. Shedding the impact of the GST and demonetization, India's economy is picking up quite nicely and will expand by 7 to 7.5% in 2018-19 to again become the world's fastest growing major economy. This is what the Economic Survey of 2017-18 has said. The government will be presenting its Union Budget 2018 tomorrow. This will be the first budget in the post-GST era and the last full budget from Finance Minister Arun Jaitley before the general election in 2019. Our focus today is on the big budget expectations, the stress points and a few tailwinds the Finance Minister enjoys. What choices Finance Minister has? What will the Finance Minister do in this budget? Will the government go for a pro-poor, pro-farmer budget? Will it increase the outlay for social sector schemes? The larger question remains, how does the government plan to finance these schemes? Prime Minister Narendra Modi, at the start of the budget session, urged parties to rise above politics and contribute positively to the budget discussions and parliamentary committee meetings. Starting the program, our focus in the first segment today is on the agriculture sector. Expectations for this sector are huge on establishing funds to guarantee credit to encourage investment in agriculture sector, allocate more funds for crop insurance schemes, increase spending for dams and canals, micro-irrigation systems, provide subsidies for building cold storage to avoid wastage of perishable crops, reduce fertilizer subsidies. So let's hear it from our panelists today. Joining us on the program today, very esteemed panel. Right now, Dr. Bjpcg is former member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Thanks very much, Dr. Bjpcg, for joining us on this program. Also, a senior business journalist, Ashok Dasgupta. Thanks very much, Mr. Dasgupta, for joining us on the program. Starting the show with you, Dr. Bjpcg, huge expectations for the Union Budget 2018. Categorically, many are asking, will this be a pro-farmer budget? Your take on the agriculture sector?
Going by the present situation, though the economy has been doing well, it has picked up and it is expected to increase further in the coming months. But within that, there is a grey area, that is, there is a rural crisis or the farmer crisis. And it is a serious issue as compared to the earlier the problems agricultural sector has been facing. Though the economic survey points out about that from the long-term point of view. It says that the agricultural income is likely to fall because of the climate changes.
Right.
But it's a welcome thing that is being visionary about the future. But they should have addressed the present situation because the main problem why the agricultural sector is facing, the farmers not being able to access to the market when the cost of agriculture has been increasing and it has been borne by the farmers themselves. When it comes to the prices for the producers,
right,
they are not being able to get the benefit of the prices, whether it is MSP, which the successive government has been raising, whether it is the NDA government or the earlier or even the United Front government, successively they have been raising the MSP. But that benefit doesn't go to the farmers. And similarly, about 7-8 years back, due to the retail boom, when the market price was higher than the MSP, still the farmers could not get the benefit of that. That is because of the present system, that is APMC Act.
Right.
The farmers cannot bring their produces to the mandis. It is the middleman who exploits the situation. So unless and until you amend that act, which is in the hands of the state government, in the last budget, the finance minister mentioned that he would persuade the state government and also provided the incentive. Now this is the time to check what is the progress in that, how far it has succeeded, and what is the problem. Let the people know which states are coming in the way of amending.
Now, you made an important issue about APMC Acts, and if one goes by the President's address also, he categorically talked about the e-NAM portal and how remunerative prices for the agricultural produce is actually, has helped farmers in a big way. So, the very implementation of e-NAM and how far states have been on board in terms of amending their APMC Acts, that's the first question. And second, in your experience as the former member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, what's your assessment of the union budget of, if one has to draw a parallel, has union budgets of previous years or maybe this year also, will it really focus on the agriculture sector? Let's not forget we are focusing on 58% of the workforce which is employed in agriculture sector.
No, you're right that 58%, and when you talk about the 58% or the debate in terms of the agricultural sector, it's more than from the point of view of the agriculture, even from the point of view of the non-agricultural sector. After all, the manufacturing sector, where do they sell? So especially the FMCG goods, the consumer goods have to be sold in the market, and when it comes to market, your substantial portion of the market is a rural based market.
Right.
Now that is how even the companies like Hindustan Lever or the other, they rely on the rural market. Even from that point of view, agricultural sector is the very crucial. Now all these years we have been talking in terms of the agricultural sector, and when it comes to the initiating the measure, this is only in terms of the outlay allocated. Now I don't want to question that, but it is a mere allocation of the outlay is not sufficient. It should address it properly. And apart from the APMC Act, another thing is the refrigerated transportation system and the cold storages, which the previous NDA government initiated, but still the progress in that direction is not the satisfactory. Unless and until you address these two issues, I don't think that you will be able to help the agriculture.
Okay, so food wastage again is a big challenge, and more than food wastage, also food storage, and we have seen several such issues related to Food Corporation of India. What, in your opinion, should be a high agenda for the finance minister if one has to look at the steps which this government has taken to really enhance the income of farmers? Look at soil health card, neem coated urea, also the Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, National Agriculture Market Scheme, the NAM, also Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, interest subvention scheme. We have the Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana, the National Mission on Oilseeds and Oil Palm, Mission for Integrated Development of Horticulture, and procurement of wheat and paddy under MSP operation. These are the few of the steps which this government has taken in terms of boosting the agriculture sector. Will this budget be pro-farmer, and what this government will do in terms of increasing the farmers' income by doubling the farmers' income by 2022?
You see, two or three things. One, you just read out a number of schemes and programs that have been implemented or are in the process of implementation. Now remember that even previous regimes had a lot of farmer-oriented schemes. Long back we had this Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, which later led to the Green Revolution and all, but that is history. All said and done, the farming sector till recently was undergoing negative terms of trade. The farm sector, the rural sector is really in distress. Now a lesson for that was learned by the government in Gujarat, where that particular farming region, the ruling party did not do too well. The fact remains that there is a move of young people, son of farmers, who are moving away to cities. And also remember that we are a growing population, the land is limited, it is this land that has to provide food to the entire growing nation. Taking all this into consideration, definitely the farm sector needs incentives, not only incentives, it needs new technology, bio seeds, soil health card you talked about. But it has been seen historically that when farmers use fertilizer, it's only urea, because that turns out to be the cheapest. And he doesn't realize that it is actually spoiling his soil for the long term. Now, technology by way of satellite imaging and all that is there for rains. Another very, it's sad that 70% of the farmers have to depend on monsoon rainfall. When the economic survey talks about climate change, you have rainfall in a particular season, next 4 years there is no rainfall. Now what does the poor farmer do? An ordinary worker, wherever he is employed, he does his day's work and he is assured that he'll get that day's salary, maybe on a daily basis or a monthly basis. The farmer, after toiling the entire day, getting back home, he doesn't know that when he gets the harvest, whether he'll get his returns.
Right.
He may lose all his money because he has spent much more than what he gets. It has also been seen that lot of produce, we go through a cyclical, yearly cycle. You know, you face a shortage in a particular year, next year the sowing goes up.
Right.
There is a glut, the farmer does not get anything. And this is true of pulses, it is true of even vegetables.
Right.
Now,
So,
all these things can be rectified, not in the short term, it will take time. Now, Professor Chhattisgarh talked about warehousing, refrigerated vans. Now, these are things that have been there in the budget for the past 3 or 4 years, if I remember, that there is a stress on warehousing, but much more is needed. When you talk about wastage, one way that wastage can be reduced, 40% I am told is wasted,
Right.
be it agriculture, be it horticulture. Now, you can have, let's say for example, you have potato farmers. Now, land holding compared to developed countries, we have very small land holdings. Why can't the farmers get together in a cooperative so that you have lot of acreage under potato farming, and if there is a glut or even otherwise, why can't there be a chips processing factory set up by the same cooperative, so that if there is a glut,
okay, something very much on the
it
lines
can
of the
be
white
used.
revolution. We have seen this in the case of Gujarat also.
Lot of food processing, small units like potatoes, tomatoes, onions. You can have onion rings. You have, could have onion paste.
Okay, so you're saying agriculture cooperatives can actually play a very big role in
Like
terms of
Lijjat Papad, why can't we have farmer cooperatives in these vegetables?
Okay, Dr. Chhattisgarh, innovative ideas, because in the previous economic survey, when it talked about the agriculture sector, it said that maybe it's time to shift to crops which consume less water. So there were suggestions for more cash crops, crops which consume less water, unlike the other crops where the farmers are very dependent on monsoons, and that actually forces farmers to commit suicides, also to go by the informal credit facility route, where they are actually, the money lenders extract the worst out of them. What sort of mechanisms must be created in place which can actually safeguard farmers' income, farmers' life? Because at this stage, when the government says we are looking at doubling farmers' income by 2022, is it really possible in the current scenario?
If you address the problem practically, it is the possible. We should not approach the problem from the traditional angle, like, I mean, the political leadership, I mean, whichever the side that may be. Whenever there is a crisis in the farm side, the only thing they say that there is the MSP. But I would like to ask, why should the farmers rely on the generosity of the government of the day?
Right.
Why can't we make the farmer as an effective supply force in the same way as the producer or the manufacturer? The manufacturer doesn't sell his product when he doesn't get a just price for his product, because he is capable of storing the product, which is not possible in the case of the farmers.
Right.
As Mr. Dasgupta also mentioned, that is, unless and until you create a proper infrastructural facilities, because then the farmers need not depend on the government of the day in the form of the MSP. He will also, and freeing the farmers from the money lenders. Now, why the problem of the money lenders and the suicide? It is only because the farmers cannot sell his product in the market. Unless you remove the this middleman from the and make the market accessible to the farmers, that is how I said that this act need to be amended. But unfortunately, there are vested interests. I don't want to name the state. In one particular state, both the sides, rather both the families controlling the politics, whether it is that side, opposition or the ruling, whichever, whenever they return, both are in favor of these money lenders and the middlemen. They are not in favor of amending the APMC.
Do you see a scope? Do you see a scope, because we have seen successive governments, they have not really been in a position to implement MS Swaminathan Committee recommendations. Do you think it's high time, because the Swaminathan Commission categorically talks about fixed income for farmers. Do you think this is a provision which the government must look at in this budget?
No, how can you achieve the fixed income? Only thing that you can facilitate a condition that they earn a better income. That is, when you say the doubling of income, it is only the creating a situation where the farmers will be in a position to earn a better. It may be double, it may be the 3 times. But for that, you have to create, you have to provide the required infrastructural facilities, not giving in terms of like farm wave, I mean the
farm loan waivers,
loan wave, or raising the MSP. You create a market situation where the farmers command a price.
So the larger point is stop knee-jerk reactions, stop ad hoc measures which the agriculture sector has seen in last several years. There has to be a greater holistic approach, a comprehensive approach towards addressing rural infrastructure also, when we are talking about mechanization, irrigation facilities must be provided to farmers so that we see less number, in fact no number of farmer suicides happening in this country. But one has to wait for tomorrow to know that whether the allocations for the agriculture sector will go up and what this budget will mean for the farmers. But time now for me to slip into a short break. Next, when we come back on the other side, let's look at the infrastructure sector, expectations from that sector. What will happen to roads, railways, power? Will the budget increase for these sectors or not? Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Insight. Infrastructure sector hopes for increase in budgetary allocations with focus on roads, railways and urban infrastructure. Dedicated allocations for specified large infrastructure projects announced, such as bullet trains, Bharatmala, Sagarmala, smart cities, inland waterways development, can also be made to expedite these projects. Further, budgetary allocation towards NHAI can be increased, keeping in view the increased capital outlay on national highway development. To revive private sector interest in taking up new projects, the independent regulator for specific infrastructure subsectors can be created, which can focus on resolution of bottlenecks and further improving the regulatory environment. So these are the larger expectations from the infrastructure sector. And joining us on the program now is also economist from National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, Dr. N.R. Bhanumurthy. Thanks very much, Dr. Bhanumurthy, for joining us on the program. So you were not there in the first segment. Let me take a quick reaction from you. Your expectations for the agriculture sector, followed by the infrastructure sector.
Well, agriculture is basically a state subject. I think the central budget has a very limited role in terms of agriculture. Having said this, for the past 2 years, the government has been focusing on the agriculture sector and especially the rural segment. I think if you look at, we are going to discuss the infrastructure. If you look at the rural infrastructure, the kind of push the government has given for the past 2 years in terms of PMGSY or rural housing, rural electrification, I think it has been a big push in terms of the allocation. So all these things should help the agriculture. But my submission is that the agriculture should be taken care much more by the state governments than the central government.
And what do you think, what has really stopped the state governments in terms of tackling the agriculture sector when we are talking about a large number of workforce employed in the agriculture
No, it's not necessary that all states are doing it the same way. There are some states are doing very well and some of the states are not really doing well. And I think that can be because of many reasons. There may be because of the local governance issue, there may be because of the local fiscal issues. I think it may be for a variety of reasons why some states are doing better compared to other states. But the problem, if you look at recently, if you have seen what happened in Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh and other parts, the price discovery mechanism is the biggest problem in the agriculture sector. We have seen Madhya Pradesh doing very well. I mean, they have been growing at double digit for the past 5-6 years. But suddenly we found that the farmers are not able to get the the remuneration that they are supposed to get. I think there is a big gap in terms of the farm to plate. I mean, the way the price builds up between these two, I think there is a need for a much better price discovery mechanism in this country.
In fact, this reminds me that in one of the meetings of Niti Aayog, Shivraj Singh Chauhan was invited to make a presentation that how agriculture sector has been a big boost for the Madhya Pradesh state economy. But as far as the infrastructure sector is concerned, Economic Survey says India needs $4.5 trillion by 2040 to develop infrastructure. Now, we are looking at huge NPAs. We are looking at a lot of cautious optimism being exercised by banks in terms of lending money. Where will the money come from?
Well, the money, whatever the 4 trillion that you are talking about, I don't think the survey is saying that it has to come from the public sector. In fact, even in the past, if you look at in the 12th plan, there was an estimation of $1 trillion. And I think large chunk of money should be coming from PPP or the private sector. So what the government can do is that it create an enabling environment such a way that both public sector as well as the private sector can participate in enhancing the infrastructure investment. And its 2040 estimation is slightly far from us, but I think we need to immediate task is to get into the infrastructure which is actually collapsing. There are some of the infrastructures are really collapsing in some parts of the country. I think that's really the main focus of should be.
Is it also important to discuss to distinguish between basic infrastructure and high-end infrastructure? Because when we look at projects like Bullet Train, Bharatmala, Sagarmala, smart cities, inland waterways development, there has been a big debate on getting the basic services right than be talking about the bullet trains or the smart cities, or getting the basic services, water and sanitation facilities in your cities than to be talking about smart cities. So, what sort of infrastructure push you expect from this budget?
No, even when you talk about these big projects like bullet trains or the smart city, they support each other. Even though these facilities are created, automatically that will lead to the development of the other project which you may categorize as small projects. But the real problem here is, I don't think that the resources, anyway infrastructure is allowed for the 100% foreign investment. I am sure that many foreign investors are ready to come in. But the basic problem, whether it is the foreign investors or the domestic investor, some of the laws related to this. Now, when we talk about the bullet trains or the smart cities, real problem is the land acquisition. Now, we are stuck with the R&R Act of 2013, where it says that unless you succeed in acquiring 80% of the required land for the project, the government will not step in. Now, this was a panic reaction of the then UPA government against the resistance by the farmers for acquiring the land for the SEZs and all. Now, without facilitating the promoters, whether it is the private promoters or the PPP projects, without being able to acquire the land. Then again, another problem is the environment. Now, there are several projects, let alone the private projects, even the projects put up by the NHAI or the Coal India, they have been stuck up. In fact, they are in the court. The other wing arm of the government, that is Environment Ministry, is coming in the way of that in the name of Forest Act or that. Though the present government, I mean, immediately after coming to the power, they brought the, or through the ordinance, they exempted some of these projects like infrastructure or affordable housing or for the security purposes and all those things. But since the government doesn't have the majority in the upper house, they could not get it approved by the parliament. Now we are back to the 2013 position, whether it is environment or the land acquisition.
So you're referring to land acquisition challenges, resettlement, rehabilitation challenges, and how these challenges actually lead to cost overruns and project delays, and finally affect the infrastructure sector and also the larger investor sentiment. So a foreign investor who would want to invest in a particular project, if there are so many issues, why would they do that? And we have seen several such cases in several states, and the sort of equation that exists between the center and the state government. What, in your opinion, will happen? Because the Economic Survey talks about revival of investment cycle, private investment. Do you see a possibility that investment in the infrastructure sector will really pick up?
Well, difficult to say, for the simple reason that you see, private investment is not picking up, and that has been mentioned in the economic survey also. In fact, that is one of the main concerns, that private investment is not coming up. Now, infrastructure particularly, most of the projects have longer gestation periods. Obviously, a person who puts in his money, it cannot be through bank capital.
Right.
It has to be longer term pension funds or the longer term funds. Now, that has been a major problem again.
Okay.
You put in money from taking money from banks and then you get stuck. Now, another story, that most of the problem why private investment is not coming in is because of the investment that took place during the slowdown, and that capacity is lying idle.
Okay.
You know, right now we are using just about 71 to 72% of capacity. 30% is still idle. Now, this is definitely a long-term problem, for the simple reason that even if demand goes up and companies find that they need to create more capacity, they have the idle capacity to utilize.
Okay.
So that investment will come much later. Now, coming to infrastructure, since private investment is not coming into the normal sectors, infrastructure private investment, I do not think, it's almost zero.
Okay.
So it has to be public funding. Now, how much money is there for public funding? You mentioned bullet train, you mentioned Sagarmala and all these projects. Now, these are sort of icon projects. Now, Professor here mentioned bullet train. Obviously, in any infrastructure project, even for roads, land acquisition becomes a problem.
Okay.
Because you have, let's say, 10 kilometers, you go on fine, but suddenly 1.5 kilometers, that case is in litigation.
Right. So even the definition of public purpose project, and we have seen this, there was a huge debate earlier on what actually defines a public purpose project, and what sort of space the government has in terms of allocating greater funds for the infrastructure sector. That will be known tomorrow, but higher funds to infrastructure sector, especially to roads, railways, urban infrastructure, is a major expectation. Also, how to reduce the regulatory bottlenecks, again a challenge for the government as far as the infrastructure sector is concerned. Time now for me to slip into a short break. Next, when we come back on the other side, we move to the next sector, and that is the manufacturing sector, and the understanding between the sort of steps which the government has taken in terms of the Make in India initiative for the manufacturing sector, how far it has worked, and the huge gap between the manufacturing and the services sector in terms of the contribution it makes to the economy. On the other side, stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Insight. The NDA-2 government had launched its Make in India program in year 2014 to encourage the world to use India as a global production hub. It promised reforms on norms for foreign direct investment, unpredictable tax policies, and a difficult regulatory environment. Prime Minister Narendra Modi presented Make in India as the biggest brand to emerge from the country. India's manufacturing sector contributes around 17 to 18% of the GDP as compared to China's 34%, while that in Korea is 29%, 25% in Brazil and 27% in Thailand. Focus now on manufacturing and services sector and what really explains the huge gap in terms of share in the GDP. Coming back to you, Mr. Bhanumurthy, why manufacturing hasn't really picked up in the way the government would want it to?
See, I think we need to look at it in a perspective between manufacturing and service sector. You know, if you look at manufacturing, as Dr. Shettigar already pointed out, one of the reasons that we are not able to do well in terms of manufacturing sector is there are two crucial inputs, that is the land and labor. You know, the land and labor is a major issue in this country. We know that the labor laws are very stringent, I'm not saying that we have to make it very liberal, but I think one needs to be a little more pragmatic when we look at labor laws. Some states are doing some changes in the labor laws, but the biggest problem here is the land. You know, the land is a major problem in terms of doing a business in this country. On the other hand, if you look at the services sector, so for that the component of land in the overall services production is very limited. So that's why we had a advantage in the service sector. We had a graduates much better than other parts of the world,
right.
and we could take advantage of that that development, and that's one of the reasons why we have seen a huge jump in the share of service sector. So the manufacturing sector, whatever we say about the policies at the national level, I think at the again I'll come back to the states. I think states have a much major role in enhancing the manufacturing sector. I'll give you one instance. There are many states in this country, even today, they don't have land records.
Okay.
What about, I mean, we cannot talk about land acquisition in those states. So if that is the situation, I don't expect that manufacturing will see a major jump. And if at all, if it happens in the few pockets, maybe in the west or in south.
Okay.
And that is going to create a huge disparity in this country.
Okay, Dr. Chhattisgarh, what it takes to boost the manufacturing sector? Again, schemes like Make in India, Mudra financing, skill development, digital economy, also several such initiatives have been taken. What is not working in this sector?
In fact, the government has done a lot as far as the encouraging the manufacturing sector is concerned. Even when it comes to the imports also, like the large imports, like even about the defense equipment or even the aircrafts, unlike the past, now whenever they enter into the agreement, they will see that at least the components are manufactured in India. From the point of view of the Make in India, so they have been doing a lot, even the ease of doing business. This year itself, there is a jump up by 30 points as compared to the last 2-3 years. It is from 142 to we have jumped to the 100. It's a great achievement, but still there are many clearances are required. Now the government's target is to reach the level of 50th rank.
Okay.
Now if we succeed in reaching, it is not that such an ambitious target. In fact, the countries like Russia, they are also in the same position like ours. Within 1 year, they could also reach the target of 50th rank. So it is possible. Now if you create a business friendly environment, I'm sure that the manufacturing sector will do. Now when it comes to the performance, it is also linked to the market. Now as far as the international market is concerned, since it has started picking up, now also the industrial production also picked up. So I'm sure that in the coming days they will do well. Now with regard to the issue Mr. Dasgupta raised that about the investment falling.
Right.
Now there is one strong reason for this fall in the investment is maybe because of the good intention of the government, like bankruptcy court.
Okay.
It is what you call the game changer in this thing. But now it also had a negative impact in the sense that now that the most of the units which are about to get listed, like 12 companies which got listed under the bankruptcy court, in order to avoid that, they started divesting and started repaying. Now it's a good development.
Okay.
Now when you look at the investment per se, of course there must have been fall in the investment. That is how some people also point out the fall in the credit. So it is for the good reason. And similar in the case of the construction sector, I think yesterday there was a report that more than 1 lakh houses are lying vacant.
Right.
This is again because of the demonetization and other acts like the RERA, which is discouraging the black money flowing into the construction sector. Earlier, which used to be around 30 to 40% used to be in the cash form. Plus under the RERA, now the builders have been made accountable. So these are the measures with the good intention, but at the same time it has also had an impact, negative impact in terms of the construction, because the builders have been made accountable. I am sure that in the coming years again they will get boost, because already the property prices have come down. It will have the
Okay,
impact.
these are firm measures which the government has taken, but simultaneously there's also been collateral damage because of these firm measures and the fact that many of the houses are lying vacant. Also, you know, one looks at the domestic consumption, where is the money in terms of buying these houses, and how do you really boost consumption? That again remains one issue which the government might focus in this particular budget. But what's your understanding? Because here we are looking at a target of making manufacturing, increasing the share to 25% of GDP in manufacturing by 2022. Do you see the sort of infrastructure which is there in terms of increasing from 17 to 18% to 25% by 2022?
See, Natasha, all these things I think are work in progress for the long term. Manufacturing right now, as you've said, 17 to 18%, whereas China is 34%. And remember that when we are talking about jobs, it is the manufacturing sector that creates most jobs. Services sector does not create so many jobs.
Right.
Now, you need to, for a good balance of the GDP in the economy, you need to move out people from agriculture into manufacturing or other processes, so that you know, the GDP contribution is not skewed and farm productivity increases. Now, the campaign started Make in India, but then, as pointed out by Professor Bhanumurthy, land acquisition as far as big manufacturing is concerned is a major problem.
Okay.
What is needed is, like you have in certain countries, but they have a different system of governance, which is why probably it's possible. You need one window clearance. That whatever approvals you need, you come and get it through one window and you go ahead. Right now we have a situation where you have central clearances, and then you go to the state have their clearances, and I'm sure people have not become saints overall.
Okay.
There are a lot of give and take that takes place.
Okay, so there's a lot of, you know, you mentioned single window clearances in terms of investments, and also most importantly skilled employment in this sector. In fact, there's a data which says that to achieve 25% of manufacturing GDP by 2025 as compared to around 17 to 18% right now, this needs India to grow at 9 to 10% over the next 3 decades and create 100 million new jobs, and can only happen if we augment the manufacturing sector for offtake by both domestic as well as international markets. So that is something, you know, which one has to see that how far Skill India has worked. So in the final segment, let's try and understand the employment scenario, the job creation scenario, and skillful employment, how far the budget of 2018 will address these challenges in the final segment. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Insight. Every month, 1 million Indians become age eligible to join the workforce. But the growth in jobs has not kept pace with the rising number of aspirants. The result, unemployment has been on the rise despite India supposedly being one of the brightest spots in global economy. More than 60% of the 8 lakh engineers graduating from technical institutions across the country every year remain unemployed as per All India Council for Technical Education. Our focus now in the final segment on education, skills and unavailability of jobs. From you, Professor Bhanumurthy, unavailability of jobs. So do you see a possibility that this particular budget will look for new measures, look for something which can create jobs? Because that is something which remains a major challenge.
Yeah,
for
I
this
think
government.
that's the promise of the Prime Minister when he came in 2014, that he will create 10 million jobs every year. Unfortunately, it's very difficult for us to say whether India has generated that many jobs or not, because we just don't have a robust database to say that the jobs have been generated or not. So I think that's a point that we need to keep in mind when we say that this government has not generated jobs. We just don't know. We don't have any information. But the focus, I'm sure, because this is going to be the last full budget before the 2019 election. I'm expecting the finance minister focus more on the employment generation, and in fact it is inconsistent with the 25% manufacturing the share of manufacturing target that has been fixed by the government for 2022.
Okay.
In that sense, I think again it's still a work in progress, and we have seen, as you rightly pointed out, there are a lot of projects got struck, and there are a lot of private investments are not happening. So these are all work in progress, and at the same time what I feel is that the biggest constraint the government is going to face in terms of enhancing the share of manufacturing from 18 to 25 is the FRBM.
Okay.
I think this is something we are really missing out here. We want to have a very strict FRBM roadmap, and at the same time we don't want to we want to increase the share of manufacturing. As the other panelists have also said, the private investment for long term investment is not going to happen in the immediate future. I think the public sector, the government should come in to enhance the infrastructure investments.
In fact, this is mentioned also in the economic survey, where the CEA has talked about moderate fiscal consolidation rather than actually for the stringent sort of steps or meeting the fiscal deficit targets. But largely, what's your understanding in terms of job creation, Dr. Shettigar? Where are we headed? Is the government in a position to create more jobs?
I think the way we look at this, the whole issue, I think there is a need for change in the mindset. When you talk about, because you mentioned that so many engineers come out and we fail to provide. On the other hand, it should be otherwise. That is, when you talk about the creating the skill, that should be keeping in view the demand for the skill.
Right.
And here, suddenly because there is a demand and so many people set up engineering college, and now it is not the responsibility of the rest of the people to generate the job. And when people get educated, that should be keeping in mind what is the demand for such particular skill. Now, as far as the generation rate of employment growth is concerned, I am sure that there is a deceleration, not a job loss as somebody points out. And all. But this is a practical thing. I mean, it's a real thing, because when you give the freedom to the investors in terms of the technology he can use, in terms of the product he can produce or the location. So naturally, though, he would like to produce the product with the minimum irritation, and that is in terms of the labor. So he will naturally would like to use the modern technology. So we should not expect job generation from the organized sector. On the other hand, like Prime Minister's scheme like Skill India, or encouraging the entrepreneurs, and also creating the jobs in the rural sectors like agro-related and the agro-based jobs. So we should look the job creation in the unorganized sectors rather than looking at the jobs generation
and
in
the MSME sector, which has a huge potential.
Again,
to create
MSME
jobs.
sector, it has been doing well.
Right.
So we should encourage these entrepreneurs coming in there. That is how the Prime Minister has been encouraging. The job generation will be done in this.
So what you're saying, it's not just really a demand and supply problem, also the employability factor. The students who are actually coming out of these institutions, can they really be employed by many of the industries or the big organizations who are looking for the rightful candidates? Because education remains a major issue, learning outcomes remain a major challenge. In fact, there's also been a talk of creating an ecosystem where there can be greater understanding and interactions between academia, research and institutions and the industry people, where they know what they need and the academia can generate. Final comments on the program. Union Budget 2018, from your opinion, jobs, what really will be high on priority from your perspective?
You see, high priority, I think, definitely will be agriculture sector, along with the rural infrastructure. Then basic urban infrastructure. You have the smart cities. Every week, fortnight, you have new cities being added.
Right.
But how much work actually is taking place there is not known as yet. And education. Apart from fiscal consolidation, as you just mentioned, that it should not be stringent. In fact, I remember in the last program also we said that the 3.2% is nothing very sacrosanct. Provided what you are spending on, you're not frittering away, you can go in for a pause, which a lot of other governments have done before.
Okay.
So there has to be public spending to keep the wheels of industry moving, there has to be some incentive towards housing, because that there's so many allied industries connected to housing, that itself is one big segment.
Okay. Okay.
And when you talk about jobs, during demonetization and all, construction activity took a hit, major hit, and we are not talking about the quality of jobs, but even laborers lost their jobs because there was inactivity.
Okay.
And when you talk about jobs, we have a very complex problem at various levels. Simple example, somebody goes through medical, does his MBBS and gets into IAS. Now, it is money wasted because you're wasted.
Okay.
Somebody else could have been a doctor.
Okay, okay. Now, you've raised several issues. In fact, the last issue in terms of students from medical arena shifting to civil services calls for another discussion. But quickly, your comments, final comment on the program. How optimistic you are about this budget? Will this be a populist budget, as many are saying?
In fact, world over, when the government is gearing up for the election, more than economic logic, it is a political consideration. I'm sure that it will be political budget. Maybe even when you addressing the economic issues, it is only from the point of view of gearing up for the elections. Maybe in that connection, maybe the government may address some of the issues relating to the income tax, like attracting the middle class or the salaried section. Apart from the addressing the farmer issue, not from the long-term point of view, but attracting their attention in the immediate term frame. So basically it will be political, because if you start addressing, you cannot implement the harsh economic measures during the election year, and it is let alone our government. Throughout the world, no government implements.
Right. So political economy at its best. Final word on the program.
After looking at watching this Independence Day parade and the color of the economic survey, I'm sure it's going to be a pink budget this time, where you will have more focus on the women and gender related issues.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's going to be, that's what my expectation.
Okay, women and gender also will be high on priority.
It can be political also.
Okay, it can be political also, but what it will be all about, one has to wait till tomorrow and 11 a.m. when Finance Minister will be presenting the first budget after GST implementation and also the final budget of this term of the NDA-2 government. Thanks very much all of you for joining us on this program, and that's all we have for you in this edition of Insight. Thanks very much for watching.